Well, great day to you. It is a wonderful day to be alive and a marvelous day to just be here and experience the life that you've been given. Today we're going to be talking about how to live life after the death of a parent. Over the past few weeks, I've been talking about grief, and I want to continue talking about grief because there are so many people that are challenged with grief and grieving, and sometimes they don't have the opportunity to just understand what should life look like once you've experienced the death of a loved one, and how do you move forward when you experience the death of a loved one. Today, I'm going to talk specifically about life after the death of a parent. And so this particular topic will not resonate with everyone, and it's not designed to do that. It is designed to resonate with those that have lost a parent and they are trying to just navigate life forward and figure out what is supposed to happen now that I am still here, but my parent is no longer here. And how do I normalize my life when I feel so absent or avoided or abandoned, sometimes feeling angry, sometimes not knowing what to say? How do I compensate when my parent is no longer here? Am I guilty? Am I not guilty? What do I do? And so I'm here to speak directly to that, as well as how long does grief last? Because people that have really never lost anyone significant in their life, they have an assumption that grief should last about 30 days, or grief shouldn't last that long, and not really knowing how long does grief really last. And so I want to give some framework around that and respond to that. So you have an opportunity to where you can participate in the conversation. You can participate by comments in the comment section, hearts and likes. Now let me place this disclaimer here, and we will begin talking about this subject matter. Okay? All right, this Facebook Live does not reflect the life of anyone that I know personally. We do not use this platform to talk about anyone, any pastor, any business, any politician, anyone directly. This platform is used to share truths about concepts on selected topics for discussion. This Facebook Live is paid for by the experiences that have made me a better me. All right, so let's begin talking. Living life after the death of a parent. Now, let me be honest right here on the onset. Regardless of the type of relationship that an individual has had with their parent, whether male or female, whether you call it a great relationship or not a great relationship, the moment that death happens, the child that is remaining in the earth is affected by that death. All right, the very moment that death happens, that child is affected, whether they had a great living relationship with their parent or not. The moment that death happens, something happens to the individual. And if we're going to support people in their grieving process, one of the things that we have to do is to be able to understand that whoever remains, which is the child, regardless of what their relationship was with their parent while they were alive, the moment that they are deceased and buried or cremated, that he or she is affected. And many times they are affected for the rest of their life, not knowing what to do. And so let me tell you some common things that people do that are great, but they're not always good. Did you hear how I said that? They're great, but they're not always good. So I'm going to talk about some of these common things, okay? So some of the common things that people do that are great, which is they honor the deceased. They honor the deceased. It is a great thing, but it's not always good. And they honor the deceased by having memorials, by creating shrines, by remembering their death. Like they have funeral anniversaries. That's been one of the most unique things that I've noticed via the internet over the past several years, is that where we've had birthdays and anniversaries, now people have become more accustomed to having anniversaries for the deceased. And so all of these things are great, but they're not always good. The reason that they're not always good is because some of the things that people do in trying to honor the life of their parent can paralyze them, because sometimes they'll end up reliving the experience every time they create the anniversary. Now, here's the irony, is that no matter what we do, and let me say this for people that don't know, because we are on social media, and some people are going to say, well, how does he have the right to say what he's saying? Well, I lost my father at the age of 17, and becoming an adult man without my father and accomplishing some of the things that I have accomplished without my father has been like a whirlwind. And there is no book, there is no cheat code. Matter of fact, let me tell you, people don't even talk about it in like a subject matter. There's no class. Like, people really do not have the conversation. So what am I supposed to do now with the rest of my life and my parent is not here? Because it is assumed in many cultures that when you lose your parent, that you're going to be older in life. Like, you have almost lived an entire lifetime with your parent. And let me say, it is a blessing. And I count it a blessing when I'm able to see families and their parents are in their 80s and their 90s, and they're still able to experience that. But here's the nature of life. That is just not everyone's testimony. That is not everyone's experience. So now, how do you move forward? Is that you gotta understand this one thing, is that you nor I have control over anyone's existence. Regardless of who they believe in or who they do not believe in, when you talk about the existence of life itself, that you nor I have control over anyone's existence. Now, for those of you that are like me, that have lost your parent at an early age. My father was 43 years old when he transitioned from this world. Now, you may, regardless of what age your parent was when they transitioned, you may be in your mind saying to yourself, but I did not get enough time with them. I did not get a chance to experience enough with them. Well, how do you move forward after you've had these various experiences is why you're here today, and I'm going to tell you. Because if you do not learn how to move forward, let me tell you that you potentially can die with the deceased. All right, did you hear what I said? If you don't learn how to move forward, you potentially can die with the deceased. That means that you'll be functioning but dysfunctional. See, how many of you have lost a loved one, and can you be transparent and honest with me today, where you've been functioning in this life but you've been dysfunctional? You've been functioning but dysfunctional, meaning that you've been able to go to work but you've still been dysfunctional. You've been able to go to church but you've still been dysfunctional. You're able to operate in career but you're still being dysfunctional. What is the dysfunctional part? It's when you still have dreams, destinies, goals, purpose on your life, and you are paralyzed by the absence of your parent. And you don't fully understand how to pay homage or honor to your parent and pursue the life that God has given unto you. How many of you have lost your parent, but then you have somehow become somewhat responsible for everybody else that's living? Like, how many of you can just take a moment of introspection and introspection and look at yourself and just think about the reality of how many times where now that your parent is not here, rather than considering the things that they've taught you, you are in a position where now you're trying to be your parent reincarnated. Lord, it's quiet this morning, but I'm saying this because, people actually end up in these types of situations where now that their parent is gone, that family members, friends of their parent, that people will assume that they are now supposed to operate in the capacity that their parent operated, that they're supposed to be as available as their parent was. They may be supposed to be as giving as their parent was. They may need to be as supportive as their parent was. Or you could be on the total opposite end. Be as stubborn as your parent was, as angry as your parent was, as whatever personality that your parent provided in the earth. Let me tell you that people will sometimes put you in a position where you are now supposed to take up all of that space. Let me tell you that the moment you do that is the moment that you position yourself for death. Now, that doesn't mean that you're going to always die physically, but it does mean that you're going to be like the Walking Dead. All right, see, when we talk about grief, how long can grief last? Grief will last as long as you don't address it. Did you understand what I'm saying? Grief will last as long as you don't address it. So let's say if you choose not to address grief for years, then grief will live rent-free in the background of your life for years. If you choose to not address grief for months, then grief will live in the background of your life rent-free for months. Grief is so potent that it will affect your relationships. It will affect your health. It will affect your psyche. It will affect your emotions. That, listen, if you do not address grief, that grief can not only enamor your life, but it can also paralyze your life. If you never address grief, if you try to work your way through grief, let me tell you that working your way through grief is not how you address grief. When you become a workaholic while you're grieving, then all you're doing is avoiding the real pain that is there. That in order to heal in grief, you got to address it. Means that you got to acknowledge it. And acknowledging it does not require a public service announcement. Lord have mercy. Acknowledging grief does not require a public service announcement. All right, so let me give you an example of what I'm saying. That if you're grieving, you do not have to publicly announce to anyone that I'm grieving. When you are grieving, you do not have to let anybody know that you're in pain. When you're grieving, you don't have to let anybody know that you're hurting. Let me tell you what happens when people have a tendency of doing that. Typically, when people make public service announcements, that they are not looking for the public, the general public, to acknowledge them. What they are actually doing is they're trying to communicate to people that love them, that people that are around them, that they are in a complex situation and they want some attention. All right, so here comes the problem, okay? All right, the problem is the moment that you start doing that is the moment that you position yourself to be disappointed by people that you are expecting to be in tune with your life. And it is good, all right, but it's not always ethical. So how do you deal with grief? Is that you can only deal with grief day by day, moment by moment, and being honest with yourself. All right, so here's an example. If you're going to live your life beyond the death of a parent, is that at some point you got to come to a place in life where you accept the reality that whatever amount of time you spent with your parent, that was good enough for you to become. Do you hear what I'm telling you? That it was good enough for you to become. So whoever you need to become in the earth, that whatever amount of time you spent with your parent, that was enough for you to become everything that God has created for you to become. Now, I know some of you are going to be challenged by these words because you're going to be telling yourself, well, what happens when the child has lost both of their parents at a very young age, like in their adolescent years? Listen, however amount of time you've spent with your parents at whatever time they transition was enough for you to become. The reason that many people don't become is because they don't understand of what to do with the grief, and they spend time trying to honor the deceased rather than respect what they've received and learn how to live with what remains. All right, they spend time, all right, trying to honor the deceased, all right, rather than respecting what they received and live with what remains. Now, so how do you move forward with living after a parent? Understand that just because you wake up the next morning, you got to know this. Just because you get up the next morning, your parent is proud of you. That there is nothing that you can do in the earth. Nothing. Listen, and what I'm going to tell you is going to sound aggressive and it's going to sound abrasive. But I got to give you the truth. There is nothing at all that you can do right now to please your parent that is deceased. I told you it was going to be aggressive and it's going to sound abrasive. There is nothing that you can do right now, okay, that can please your deceased parent. Why am I able to say that? Well, because your parent is not here. Anything that you do that you say, this will make my dad happy, this will make my mom happy, anything you do is done in theory. Did you hear what I said? Anything you do is done in theory. There is no way to actually prove and validate that you can make your deceased parent happy because they're not here. Okay? They are not here. Now, some of you are here saying, but I just want to speak to them again. I just want to talk to them again. I just want to experience them again. Listen, let me tell you. Okay, now you must know that there are things that you can do in this earth if you continue pursuing your destiny, your dreams and your goals, that your deceased parent, the spirit of your deceased parent can validate what you're doing. I know that in Christianity that we say, well, we don't talk to the dead. And there are some people that strictly believe that there is no visitation from the deceased. There are some people that strictly believe that if you're dreaming about your deceased parent, then you are demonically possessed. That is just not my my belief. I will tell you. I'll tell you this the best way that I can. that if you continue to living and learn how to take ownership of your life after the transition of your parent, that there will be moments of validation and moments of affirmation. Now, those moments of validation and affirmation are going to be different for everyone. So that's why I am being general in my response rather than trying to give you a specific encounter, so that if you have not had one encounter or another, that you're not sitting around praying to have these types of encounters, or you are looking for an encounter, or you're saying that maybe you're being punished by God because you haven't had this encounter. No, I will tell you that if you continue living, that there will be moments of affirmation and validation. All right, and you will know it. Now, so what do you do when you're living beyond the life of your deceased parent? Let me tell you, one of the truths is that now I know I probably made you upset because I said there's nothing you could do to make them happy. They're not here. Listen, I know theoretically we want to make our parents proud because they're not here, but there's no way to validate that because they're not present. So you got to understand that what then will make your parent most proud. The thing that'll make your parent most proud is when you learn to live. Learn to live the life that's been given you, play the hand that's been dealt to you, and not complain about the life without them. That's what's going to make them happy. Live the life that's been given you, play the hand that's been dealt to you, and learn to live your life without complaining that they are not present with you. That's what's going to make them happy. If you think back over your life and just think through a series of things, that your parent was always in your life, but they never wanted you to feel what? Obligated, distressed, burdened by their presence, whether they were sick or whether they were well. What you got to get to understanding is that if you're going to live out your destiny, that you got to live that destiny out with the reality that you have everything you need to become. So how do you live without your parent? First, you got to be honest, and you got to determine in your life that you are not going to live the remainder of your days in grief. Now, that's going to be hard for many people, because if you have any ounce of guilt will make you a prisoner to grief. I want to say to all my brothers and sisters that, yes, we all can share in the same experience. Life would be so much more different if our parents were still here. However, you would never become who you are becoming if your parents were still here. Everybody's life is different. Everybody's experience and encounter is different. You have experienced this in your journey for a certain reason. You cannot move forward in your life complaining about your parent not being present. Many people that complain, they never complain out loud, but they complain in private. And and what happens is that once they start complaining about their parent not being present, they become extremely possessive about their life. And what happens is the possession, like being possessive about your destiny, that's nothing wrong with that. But being possessive about your life, there's a whole lot wrong with that, because what happens is that the moment that the person becomes possessive about their life, they end up having severe trust issues. They don't really trust people well. That they let people in at a distance. That because they haven't dealt with the grief, they end up in a place where they believe that they can live, but they're not satisfied with the pain that they've encountered or have experienced. I'm here to tell you that there has to be a moment where you got to decide what does it look like for you to live and move forward? You got to know what that means for you. All right? You got to know what that means for you. And when you start to understand that, you will learn how to move forward without your parent. That your parent is already proud just because you wake up every day. Your parent is proud. If you're going to work, your parent is proud. What you got to do is be able to master grief. You got to master grief. You understand what I'm telling you? Master grief. Because if you never master grief, let me tell you, grief can rob you of your life. Grief is a silent killer. We don't talk about it enough. Listen, just because you go on a vacation don't mean that you are dealing with grief in and of itself. No, you got to learn to master grief. How do you master grief? By being honest with yourself. Okay? Being honest with yourself. All right, so let me give some examples. All right, I'm going to give some personal examples. All right, there have been times where I've been in various victories and various challenges, and I've wanted my father to be present. I would say things out of my heart like, Lord, I wish my dad was here. Okay, now here comes the reality. I can only permit myself to live in that space for a few minutes. You understand? Because it's okay to be human. The problem with many Christians is that they try to be superhuman. No, the only thing super about us is the Holy Spirit. See, you try to be superhuman and try to be invincible. No, it's okay to be broken. Lord have mercy. I don't have to be invincible because God is invincible. I can be broken because he's a healer. But now, how do you deal with moments of brokenness? And what do you do when you actually miss the physical presence of your parent? What I do is I live in that space. I give myself only a few minutes to live there. All right. Did you hear me? Only a few minutes. So let's say today, if I missed my dad, all right, I will only give myself the head space and the emotional space a few minutes to live there. Meaning that I'm going to acknowledge that I miss him. I'm going to experience that emotion of not having him here. But at the end of the day, I'm going to close that door. Why? Because he's not here. And if you don't close the door with grief, grief will lead you into misery. All right. Now, if you have any level of spiritual consciousness, you got to know that the enemy, the adversary that wars against your life, that he is waiting for you to live in grief, misery, and depression. And the moment you get in depression, that have you ever found yourself working and you're able to produce, but you're not advancing? You're able, Lord Jesus, have you ever seen this where you're able to produce, but you're not advancing? You understand what I'm telling you? What you got to realize is that if you're going to live your life without your parent because they are deceased, that you got to make yourself accountable to being productive. Now, how do you do that? Is that you got to repossess your dreams, your goals, and your desires. Now, let's be honest, okay? Let's be honest, because some of you are still challenged by what I'm saying. All right, so let's be honest. When your parent was living, when they were here, you had dreams, goals, and aspirations about your life. When they were present. Okay. Now that they are no longer physically present, why are you challenged about the dreams, goals, and aspirations that you had for your life? See, the reason that many people become challenged, I'm going to answer this for you. The reason that many people become challenged is because they lose continuity in what should life look like in honoring my parent that has gone on. The first thing that I would tell you, if you're going to honor their life, you got to live. Because if you don't live, My brothers and sisters, grief can affect you physically. You could find yourself in positions in life where your health is challenged because you haven't made a decision to address the grief that is going on inside of your life. Just because you're functioning don't mean that you're not dysfunctional. Stop allowing yourself to move around in this earth just because you go to work or you're going to school or you're doing ministry. Stop allowing yourself to act like you're okay if you have not done the necessary work to be okay. I petition that everybody needs to move past grief. Grief does not mean that moving past grief does not mean that you don't love your loved one. Moving past grief means that you are not willing to live in the pain of the absence of your loved one. Just because you become healthy and you move forward and your life is productive does not mean that you have forgotten your loved one. Come on, my brothers and sisters. No, when you are deciding to move forward with your life and to be productive with your life, what you got to take ownership of is that, you know what? I am still here and I'm responsible for my destiny. I'm responsible for my purpose. See, if you don't address this grief, then let me tell you, then what will happen is you will live the remainder of your days trying to honor someone that's no longer present. You will find in African cultures that in African cultures, so from Africa, and it's also embedded inside of African cultures today, not only African cultures, Spanish-speaking cultures, and Italian cultures, all share in these three things, is that once they experience the decease of a loved one, that it is hard for them to detach from the grief of that deceased loved one. Because we spend a lot of time saying that we're honoring, but we don't spend time talking about reliving the death experience. How many of you have ever just relived that whole memory? You go back to the scene, you go back to the hospital, you go back to the funeral, and you're reliving it in your mind. You're reliving it in your mind. You're reliving it in your mind. You're telling yourself what you should have did different, who didn't do what. You're going through the whole experience all over again. My question to you is, why would you continue to take yourself through that emotional and psychological roller coaster over something that you cannot change? You must understand that at the moment that your parent was cremated or your parent was buried in the earth, that at that time you did everything with the resources that was available to you and the people that were supporting you. You did everything that you could do at that moment. Do not guilt yourself into your shoulda, coulda, wouldas. A better way to process your life, and then I'm going to leave you all. A better way to process your life is be thankful that you had an opportunity to experience the life of someone amazing. That's a step forward. That's a step forward. Examine things, how they respond to various crises or challenges. Go back and remember some of those things. Now, ask yourself, when you're in a crisis or a challenge, all right, is that applicable for you? Just because your parent is not here, you are not held responsible for managing your life the way that they manage their life. So I know it sounds good. Let me see. What did Daddy do in a situation like this? What did Mama do in a situation like this? For some of you, you're going to say, what did Grandmama do in a situation like this? I know all of that sounds good, but the truth of the matter is you don't know what they would do. Why? Because you don't know the variables that were included when they were making certain decisions. You don't know. And so you're speculating. And many times when we do that, we're speculating what their decision making process was, because we want to position ourselves to somewhat honor them. Let me tell you, again, if you're going to honor the absence of your loved one, then sometimes you got to learn to live and learn to take ownership. See, things that I've learned over these years, okay, is that in the absence of my loved one, of my dad, is that what's going to make my dad proud is that I can accept, let me put it like this, I can embrace my failures and accept my victories. That's the best way for me to put it this way. Why? Because life is about failures and victories. You ain't just going to live your life with just victories. You got to understand that if you're going to be responsible, that you got to be able to embrace those failures, those losses, and then you got to accept those victories. But you can't lose yourself just because your parent is not here. Why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you sitting here and you are not your best self? Why? Because you're living in misery, thinking that you're honoring them. No, to honor them is to now take the legacy of the family to the next level. What is required for you to be the instrument that's needed to take the legacy of your family name to the next dimension? Let me tell you, how do you do that? You do that once you take responsibility that you must live. But do you know what happens with most people? That many people that do not figure out how to do this, that they become paralyzed by the absence of their parent. And let me tell you what ends up happening. Many times, whether they are doing a business, a school, they're doing community work, doing church work, many times they end up isolated and they don't trust hardly anyone because they have been damaged by the absence of their parents. So I said all that to say many times they end up doing life by themselves. Why are you doing that to yourself? Why are you doing that to yourself? Now, I'm going to conclude with this. How long should grief last? Grief should last until you get to the point where you are tired of crying. When you are tired of being miserable, when you're tired of being upset, when you're tired of hurting, what you do with that is you got to get to a place where you in yourself, you're saying that, you know what, I know my loved one is not here. I know that they're not present with me. But you know what, I'm tired of not feeling my best. I'm tired of not feeling amazing. I'm tired of not feeling like I can conquer the world. Listen, that doesn't mean you have forgotten them, but you got to get over that grief. If you don't ever get over that grief, let me tell you that grief will lie dormant in your life. And the moment that you have opportunity, grief will say, hello, I'm here. And let me tell you what grief would do. Let's say an amazing opportunity will come before you. Grief will show up and say, we can't do this right now because you're hurting. You can't do this right now because you lost your parent. You can't do this right now because people are going to walk out on you. People are going to abandon you. People are going to hurt you. And all of that can sometimes be provoked from you not being in a place where you're over the grief, where you're beyond the pain. No, my brothers and sisters, you got to get to a place to where you are beyond it. That doesn't mean that you've forgotten them. Just get beyond it. Now, there are going to be some things that I've said today that you're going to watch this Facebook Live and you're not going to agree. It's okay to not agree. But I will tell you that at some point, if you want to be your best self, you got to get beyond it. There are going to be some of you that are going to say, I've never thought about this. Well, that's what this is about. This is about you thinking outside of the box that you've created for yourself. And understand this, that there are many people that are doing what you say you want to do, and they too have experienced losses. If you want to move to the top of your industry, then you have to be able to manage your grief process a little bit better than probably what you're doing. Now, there are ways you could do this. You could find a confidant, talk with that person, go to a counselor, find a pastor. But you need to understand that if you continue internalizing that grief, internalizing it in your heart, trying to process it in your own mind, if it has already impaired your life, it will continue to impair your life because it is suggesting to you that you don't have the capacity to override this pain by yourself. So you need assistance. If you need assistance walking through grief, that doesn't mean that you are a bad person. And it doesn't mean that your parents have not given you great things. You got to know that we all are wired differently. And when we're wired differently, don't live your life based on what mama would do or what daddy would do. All right, my father was a pastor. All right, I pastor pastors. I cannot pastor people the way my father pastored people. It sounds good, but it is not applicable in this era that we live in. Neither is it ethical for me to be applying the methodology of a person that's no longer alive. You could do it, my brothers and sisters. I understand that this is a different type of conversation, and this is not applicable to everybody, but it is applicable to someone. So as you decide to move forward, as you figure out how you're going to move forward, let me tell you that the way you do this is that you don't ever have to forget your loved one, but you cannot continue to bury them every week in your mind, reliving that every day in your heart. Listen, that is a trick that is used by the enemy to keep you in a place of bondage. Now, I know you don't like that type of terminology in conjunction with your parent. You know, me talking about, losing a parent and bondage. Seriously, grief is a prison. I can't say this loud enough. Grief is a prison. Get out. Get out. Get out. Get out of that prison. If you don't get out of that prison, grief could cause you to hang on to people. Listen, grief could cause you to hang on to people that you don't need. Grief can cause you to cater to your children, and you don't need to be catering to them. Grief can cause you to forfeit your destiny because you're trying to make a person that is no longer here happy. My brothers and sisters, we are not in the 1st century. We are not in the 14th century. We are not in the century of the knights, of the kings and the knights. No, don't live your life like that. Don't even think that that's what you're supposed to do. My brothers and sisters, every time you do that, you rob yourself of another day of being productive. So there are going to be some of you that's going to say, well, I cry a lot. Well, when you get tired of crying, guess what? You'll stop. But let me give you a little truth here. When you get tired of crying, you will stop. But one of the truths is that if you want to stop crying, you need to sometimes examine the people around you that's okay with you crying. See, you're gonna find out that as you're going through your grief process, that there are gonna be people in your life, whether they're siblings, whether they're family members, whether they are co-workers, church members, like any person, you're gonna find out that some people are gonna find out that you're grieving, and they are going to try to take advantage of your grief. Listen, some of you, you're giving everything you have, and the people you're giving to, they don't want you to be better. Why? Because they're able to get all of you because you're in pain. They're able to get all your money. They're able to get all your time. They're able to get all your attention because you're in pain. See, some people don't want you to be better. Why? Because they're your prayer partners, and guess what? They get to reacclimate their value system, and now they may get to become a great prayer warrior because you're living in pain. You're living in misery. You're just hurting. And listen, I'm not here to try to be, I'm not here to try to disregard your pain. I'm just trying to suggest to you, choose not to live in pain forever. That's all. That's really what I am trying to communicate. Because there is no prophetic word. There is nobody that can change that for you. That's a personal decision that you got to make. Choose not to live in pain forever. And your parent will be proud of you. Okay? Your parent will be proud of you. Okay? Listen, you got to get to a place in your own heart, in your own mind, in your own soul, where you yourself say, you know what? I'm better than this. Now, I've been up here for a while. For some of you that remain, I can give you a few more minutes if you want me to just expound a little bit more here on life without a parent, because there's some more things that I can share with you that you may never hear it from someone, but it's truthful, because you are here for a reason. And if you want me to give you a few more minutes, I need some hearts and likes on the screen, or some comments in the comment section that says, you can put it in my vein. I got some things that can just bless your life. It doesn't mean that you don't love your mom. It don't mean that you don't love your dad. But you got to know that you're here for a reason. The reason that you didn't die with them is because you are here for a reason. You're here for a purpose. That's why you are here. Okay? All right, so let me give you this. Some of you may be like I am, okay? Where your parent spoke all these great words over you, over your life. You can hear them in your ears, talking about your destiny, your future, things that they wanted you to accomplish, things they wanted you to do. Let me tell you, here's a truth. When your parent is deceased, you are not obligated to carry out their dreams concerning you. One of the greatest mistakes, but learning experiences that I've ever had was about my career choice. See, when I was 17 years old, I had a dream of becoming a lawyer. That's what I was going to do. But my father died, and I chose another career path. The problem is that the moment I started going in that career path that I chose, that I thought was going to honor him, I was not maximizing in my full potential of who I really was. Because I spent those early years of adulthood trying to make him happy because I wanted him to be proud of me. Well, it took me too long to learn that if my father was going to be proud of me, I had to take ownership of my own destiny. And I should have, at 17, committed to becoming a lawyer rather than trying to make a decision to do something that he suggested. All right? Now, how did that look as it relates to church? When I first started pastoring and started doing ministry on my own, I started out with the model that my father presented before me. Now, some of you listening, you're going to be saying, well, that was honorable. You were honoring the legacy of your father. No, that's not true. That's not true. I was not, and I can agree with you. When I was doing it in theory, I was thinking I was honoring the legacy of my father. But what made it wrong is that I'm not my father. The way my father approached decisions is not the way that I approach decisions. The way my father addressed crisis is not the way I address crisis. The level of education that I have and my father has is two different two different things. The experiences that I've had and the experiences that my father has had are two different things. There are some things that will overlap? A very few of them. Few, not many. Few things will overlap, not many. So what happened? As I started pastoring, I had to find my own voice. I had to embrace my own methodology, and I had to find the value that I was given by my father and figure out how does that apply in my life. So let me give you an example. All right. An example of what I'm telling you. So my father was a pastor, but I don't pastor the way my father pastored. All right. Okay. Now, what's different here is that I had to learn what was it that I got from my father and how do I apply this in my life? And so that it can now help me become who God has ordained me to become. Now, so what I learned from my father is that you can be great not needing everybody, but you can be nothing if you serve no one. That's what I learned from my father. Let me say this again. You can be great, all right? You can be great not needing everybody around you, but you cannot be great if you do not serve anyone. So how did I apply that in my life? I've applied that in my life, understanding that as I serve people, I don't need everybody around me to agree with who I serve. I could serve because I'm commanded to serve. But now how my father pastored, I'm not going to use that same methodology because I'm not him. My father didn't have boundaries. I have boundaries. You understand? My father will love people to his own detriment. No, I get tired. See, once you tell me you can't do me, I'm going to hear you. And I'm going to let you be whatever you need to be. See, my father wasn't that way. See, my father, you could go to my father and say, I can't do you right now. My father had a discipline inside of him that he will love you and to his own detriment. Well, why? See, now some of you, because you're Christian, and you're going to say, well, that's a great thing. Well, why don't you do that? Well, the reason I'm not going to do that is because when my father made a decision to do that, and he had a family, I did not like the God he loved, neither did I enjoy the concept of church that he presented before me. I'm not doing that. Why? Because it was that model that he presented before me, it was great for church people, but it was damaging for us as a family. No, I'm not doing that. See? I hope you understood what I just said. So, at the end of the day, okay, you got to understand your value system. What is your value system? And how is that applicable to your life? That's what you got to understand. And when you understand that, don't apologize for it. Matter of fact, you don't have to explain it to no one. All you have to do is become. All you have to do is be. All you have to do is become who you have been ordained to become. As I look in this church world, many people never become because of the paralyzation that they've experienced by the death of their own parent. You don't always need someone to parent you. Sometimes you just needed someone that'll hold your hand until you get better. All right. I pray that this has caused you to think about some things. Again, you ain't got to like it. You don't have to agree with it. Hopefully, at least you're thinking about it.